Hello and welcome to episode 8 of Split Decisions. We had a little bit of a break, I guess, going over the Christmas period, Mitch, but we are back with a vengeance. We're going to get to like 40 episodes by the end of the year.
Yeah. 40. I think why not go for 50 at this point, Tom? Let's shoot for the stars.
Well, I don't really want to waste too much time because I think that obviously in terms of the teams and everything like we normally talk about, there isn't a massive amount to go on until we start getting in towards the build up to Brazil. But there has been a new map, so we're just going to dive right in and start talking about it. But before I bring up like some of the pictures and stuff that we have going on, what are your general thoughts? Like, because I think we both had quite a lot of fun on this map in general, but where you ranking it? Where's it going on like your top maps so far?
Well, listen, to me, it's almost like after the David Tennant Doctor regenerated, right? Matt Smith didn't have a chance. I was going to hate him from day one, second one. It didn't matter how good he was.
Matt Smith.
You know what? I want to physically assault you for even saying that. That's disgusting. But I'll give you this. It might not be that Matt was bad, right? Especially after watching the new Game of Thrones thing, The House of Dragon. I think maybe he was actually pretty good. Maybe it was all pretty good, but maybe when all those tears from David Tennant saying, I don't want to leave. It was bad. It was bad. Okay. For me, these maps, very similar story. You took out Split. I saw my David Tennant regenerate, and we'll talk about that a little bit later on. But I'm then expecting the map you're putting in, and it's sort of taking the limelight away. So I'm expecting that I'm going to hate it, that I'm going to want to burn it. But no, I actually love it. I think it's the best map they've made so far. I think also from a competitive standpoint, just thinking about what you and me will think about with teams and what we're going to see in the VCT, it provides some of the most open dialogue in how to approach it from an agent pool, from just every perspective and engagements that you can have in the map. I also think it's a little sprinkle like Fracture. It's one of the disruptors, so to speak, where it allows teams to experience a different pace of FPS that maybe not everyone's going to be comfortable with. But I think it's going to be really exciting to see this one play out.
Well, that's the fun thing about it is I decided to put in like a few pictures of like the sites and stuff as the ones that were basically given to us. But the thing with this map is a lot of the time, especially on that attacker side, you might not even get too near them. Like, especially on A, a lot of the battles happen so early on in the round. Like, we had that when we were playing, well, I guess you were on Boaster's team. He decided to pick a Neon, and every round on A, I was just being pushed again and again and again, like using some of the doors. But I guess just in case someone has been living under a rock, we can go through some of the like bare bones basics of the map. So obviously the A site, I feel like is one that, at least from my perspective, is going to be the tougher to take, just because getting there in the first place, it's likely where most of the brawls are going to come in. You've got the sort of like little breakable door, which I've decided to put a little video in of just like how you sort of get through, and then obviously on your right is where everything fights towards that sort of A position. So I think that's sort of going to be one of the more interesting contention points. But when it comes to B and C, you can get there pretty damn fast, Mitch.
Yeah, initially when I saw the B site from an attacker perspective, I thought, oh, cool, they're just handing us an orb every round. Fantastic. And then you see how quickly that sky flash or whatever flash it may be comes around that corner and right off the rip, the defenders are in your face attacking. I think there's the site itself, even if they don't go for that early aggression, getting into it is tough. You're running through a choke point. There's 3 angles they can be peeking you from. The one disappointment for me in this is that that roof doesn't close. I mean, Zilv theorized, maybe if we plant the spike, it's going to start closing or something. But no,
Maybe
I think that'd be really cool.
That no one's found yet.
It could be. You got to use one of those like day one beta
the devs
Omen
are just
TPs.
Gonna be like,
got to get underneath the map and then find it down there. Aha! Close the roof. What does that do for us? Nothing. And now I'm stuck under the map. But it could be cool. Block some utility on the way through. No post plans.
That is the thing though. This B site definitely does give me sort of flashbacks to the Haven, although it's completely different in the sort of style of it. It's just the fact that it's a site that it may be a little bit more difficult to get into, I would say, although you can split through that same broken door we saw just moments ago. But it's more so just holding this site absolutely sucks. Like, it's like there's
Mm-hmm.
so many avenues to get back in. Like, even on your screen, you can see a couple of them, but there's one behind and then one to the right through the door. And so you basically have to, similarly to Haven, I feel like you need to battle for one of those points of contention. So, like,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of people will go back towards the window and sit and almost try and just hold after plants. In this case, you could try and do that the way you came, but it's still not a great after plant. On this map, I feel like you almost have to continue aggressing. So I think this was where you kind of saw the most retakes attempted, because if you're holding in the site, basically, if there's any ults online, you're kind of dead.
Yeah. I think over on the A side as well, you can see some of those like more passive plays where a team will play the retake if you have a killjoy ult or something like that, which was fairly common. But the B side itself, man, it depends on the utility you're up against. But you can imagine even something that isn't really seen that much, a harbor wall, right? That comes through, and all of a sudden you're blocked
Just
off
loop
from
it around.
all of the angles, right? It literally smokes the whole side, and you're already sort of forced into those passive positions. So I think that's why, again, I mentioned some of that early aggression that you'll see out of the defenders. You're going to see it a lot, because if you don't run it that way, you're left with very limited options around actually keeping attackers out of the site.
Yeah, the C site was one that I'm really interested to see how teams are going to try and defend this, because it's one of those sites where, again, it feels like there's a lot of potential for aggression. Like, one of my only sort of things I was attempting was to a very, very deep brim smoke and just try and take a battle early in the round. It
Mm-hmm.
didn't work very well. I got owned quite a few times, but it was worth the attempt. But it also just felt like when you're in that site, like, if you play against a Jet, any Killjoy setup, you can just updraft and dash straight over it, which is what Durka was doing to Suit basically every single round with a Stinger, because he was like, I can just
Yeah,
bypass all of your utility. She then started playing in mid with an Odin and spamming the plant spot, which was filth.
I love
But
it.
but it does feel like it's going to be relatively difficult to hold on to, and I think maybe someone like a Cypher could try and get it to work, but I do think it is again going to be one of those maps where like Jet kind of works, but even maybe a Chamber, because although
Mm-hmm.
the TP has definitely taken a nerf, most of the angles around this map are quite tight and ones where you can actually get back into a corner. So
Mm-hmm.
it's something we'll talk about a little bit later on, but that's definitely an agent I think we could see.
Yeah, I think again, similarly to the B side, when you look at C, it's one of those sides that if you play behind the barrier, you really have to play the far back, and it's so hard to hold that control point. And if the B side players aren't going to be having any sort of aggression around their area, again, that leaves you in a position where they can split in through the door. So if you've pushed forward to try and get the pile control, you're going to
Mm.
end up being split behind. So I think in matchmaking, from that perspective, it's going to be very, very tough to hold this site, the hardest one by far, because even when you're actually holding the choke point angle you're given at the start of the round, you can still be flanked from the left if your teammates aren't doing their job. So it can get pretty crazy as a C player.
Yeah, and obviously the main gimmick, I think most people again will have known this by now, but you've got your little revolving doors out towards long. I feel like there's going to be so many shenanigans based around these, because I've already seen it once where, what was it?
Yeah.
We had Flow and Flights go directly past each other in the Influencer tournament, and then the
Yeah.
same over on the other side of the map, the C-Link one, where you could basically just get yourself into position, sort of what you were saying as well. It's like there's so many avenues to get back towards this map. This was one where, again, we saw some attempted takes on B completely fall flat just because of the fact that you'd kind of had those issues of, okay, we're going through mid to B, and then that revolving door's gone round, so you have to look back the other way, and you get pushed from another angle. It can be pretty difficult to get into that side. So I definitely think it's an intriguing map. Now, I know that you wanted to sort of hit on like how you think it's going to play, because that's one of the things that gets quite interesting. And we have, I'm going to call it an interesting drawing, because
Spectacular one is how
that's
I'd phrase
exactly
it.
what this is.
There you go. Look at that. Wow.
Please try and explain
Let me
what the fuck this drawing
let me run back a little bit of context here. So I'm messing around with my
I need it
stylus on
too.
my phone. You know, it's got a cool little magic pen feature, and you like doodle vaguely what you're trying to draw, and then it will give you suggestions. And so I just went with the suggestions that it gave me.
I was about to say, because I don't believe that you can draw a bear like that. I don't believe
That's
that you can
fair.
draw that.
That is fair. All of these drawings way past my pay grade. But
I was
the
gonna
middle
give
one,
you the sword, but like,
no, not even close, man. Not even close.
wait,
The
wait, wait,
sword.
wait. There's a sword. What were you drawing, Mitch, that ended up looking like a sword?
So let me tell you, the middle one, this sword, is the only one that actually went according to plan. I drew a little up thing and then the handle, right, the handguard.
Okay.
And it interpreted it. The first time was the flags, and that was a sword as well. So it took me 2 tries to get there, but we figured it out. And then the bear, I think I was trying to draw a shield. I don't know how. I did a circle with a circle inside of it, and I got like a wheel and then a bear. I don't know how the algorithm thought. I'm not a very good drawer. But anyways,
Really?
the point being, we have 3 little icons, and they're showing you the
Okay.
basic choke points that you're going to have when it comes into starting out this round. And over on the A site, your bear, you can look at this, because if players do manage to sneak their way on into rubble, then maybe they'll be able to hibernate there for the whole round. They'll be able to hold that angle and contain the control, right? And that's one of the key things about this map, containing control. Talking about the B site, that's your second choke point, your second fight for the round. Defenders, look how close that barrier is. They'll be coming around that corner. If they're running something like a Phoenix, oh, you're gone, right? Your sky flashes flipping in and around the left corner. Quick peek out from a neon. Day is ruined. It's very hard to even occupy pillars in the first couple seconds. And then over towards Mound, we already had a conversation about that. I've drawn, I believe, some wind flags from an airport. That's sort of to represent how quickly that map control can be swept out of your hands, like a gale force wind coming through. You can have that sea door open up and completely obliterate you. So I think really what we've seen here is a good overview. What's that?
You're that guy that, like, when you're in like a group project and everyone else has done the presentation, and then you're coming in, you're seeing it for the first time, and you're going, yeah, these wind flags, they represent how quickly you move in. And the other people are going,
that's what it's all about. Well, Tom, no, see, I sort of knew when I drew this, I dug into the inspiration. I thought, what will Tom talk about? And I knew you were going to mention some of those Durka updrafts and dashes in. So obviously the wind really took over the inspiration there. And sent me some of the positive karma that really helped out with that one. We were getting our feng shuis up. That's what it's all about.
So we've had a little bit of a look at the map. I kind of wanted to finish on this with just a couple of different things, and one of them is agents. So I kind of want to know, like, we played a few maps each, I think, at this point. I think I sort of mentioned in the other video that, like, I like the look of something like a neon. It will be pretty fun. I don't know whether or not it will necessarily work, but especially with early map control on attack, I do think on defense, as you always, neon kind of dog shit. So you'd have to have some real, like, decent setups for that to actually work out for you. I think, again, going towards something like an Astra, just to have some of that sort of universal utility, looks pretty good. And initially, I was definitely leaning towards Cypher, but it does seem like, at least from people early on, Killjoy does look pretty good on this map. And especially with Lockdown now not being a complete piece of trash, these sites are all pretty small and can be dominated by that ult.
Yeah. Look, I'm with you. I wrote out an agent comp, and you're hitting some of the points I had, all the points actually to start with. Neon, exactly the same. I had Killjoy down. It was a Killjoy / Cypher for the exact same reason as you. You sort of start to look at some of the some of the 10-man lobbies as they were evolving, talk to some of the players who've been playing it, and I can see the validity for either of those agents. But yeah, definitely Killjoy looks fantastic coming into this map. I think because of that, I then added into my comp. So we've got Neon, we've got Killjoy. I then threw in a KO. Logic being you've got the Killjoy on the other side, right? And his utility is very useful on a ton of different positions here. I think, though, you're beneficial having a second flasher, and that's where I'm going to go out with Astra and in with Omen. I think his paranoia on this map is just stellar. So I think there's some decent opportunities there. And the only thing left then was, so we've got Neon, Killjoy, Omen. I did have Omen / Astra, to be fair. I'm just giving the other perspective.
And then / Brimstone as well.
/ Brimstone.
Just to get the rest
/ maybe Viper. I think Harbor, but no. My final one then will be Fade as well, coming in as just that extra little bit of support. Going to do a ton for you and getting behind any walls that are in play. And I think the Neon Fade early aggression you can have with the wall, reveal up behind it. You experienced it when Boaster was dashing in on that Neon. It can be pretty annoying.
Well, that was one of the things, though, that I actually enjoyed, is people playing a bit of Breach. I think that there's a lot, especially on defensive level aggression, there's a lot of cool stuff you can actually do with that. It's sort of like, especially if you look towards that like A main control that people are battling for, just throwing a breach stun through there every single round is irritating as fuck. And then also that combined with a raise, and that was just me having a bit of fun. I didn't do particularly well in the game, but it's like the amount of nade damage you can do on this map just by predicting some of the early angles can actually work. So I think there's a lot of viability. I'm also really intrigued with Chamber, because I think the problem with Chamber right now is the trap sucks. Like, in comparison to Cypher, the trap's just not good enough, especially on the attack. And teams are going to flank on this map because you're going to take map control away. So not having the Cypher there might hurt you a little bit, but you could have more of a dedicated flanker. But on defense, I think his aggression could actually be pretty cool. Like, I think it's the A stairs where you could basically peek all the way down with an operator straight to where the teams are going to cross to try and take that angle. C long as well. You've got some really early battles you can take. So I think defensively, Chamber will still be very, very good. It's just, is it worth the trade-off on the attack? And that's a question that a lot of teams are going to have to make. Final question, though. Is it a good map?
Yeah, I think absolutely. Even just the amount of debate that we can have around what agents are viable, I think that more of a question would be what agents aren't viable, and it's a very short list. If even, so the reality is looking at this map from that perspective, absolute success. I think it feeds perfectly into giving the players the toolkit or the option to bring many different toolkits into the game and synergize them up so much better than Icebox, than what we were dealing with there for just months and months and months and months of the same Icebox comp. I never want to see it again.
Yeah.
So I think they've done an amazing job there. And then I think the gimmick to the map it's not ridiculous. I mean, it's very grounded in not like in reality, but I mean the teleporter, like it changes how you think about the map so much. This is a revolving door. It's so basic, yet it can be used in so many interesting ways, as I'm sure we're going to see.
That was the one other thing I sort of forgot to throw in. Is there anything you'd actually change about the map? Because there was one thing that I saw mentioned potentially that I would, and it was just put a little bit of delay on that button. Because it does sort of maybe take away some of the fun of it, but the amount you're just able to spam the sound cue just like all the way around, you can do that pretty much infinitely. And I do think that maybe having sort of like with the door going up and the door going down when they changed it on Breeze, I think that was a much better thing because people just going with the door.
I think it also applies an element of when you spin that and you try to make that aggressive play, you just don't have the escape to immediately activate it. And oh, maybe now he's not in there anymore. Maybe he is, maybe he's not. Instead, you're almost like in an Indiana Jones movie. You're trapped in. You're just locked in.
Lost your hat.
And if he snuck past you, you're kind of like screaming to your teammates, "He's with you! I'm sorry!" Spamming the button, "Let me in!" But yeah, no, it's. I think they've done a fantastic job here. I don't want to say it's my favorite map yet, but I really, really enjoy it.
Well, that's the thing. We've almost got to rejoice because our next topic is we're moving on to what has been.
Oh yeah.
Our favorite map for a very long time. For me, both to cast and to play. Love this map with an absolute passion, and they brought it back. Now, I will say, we're going to go through all of the changes that they've made. There aren't a lot of them, and I don't think most of them are particularly interesting either, but I'm just very happy to be talking about this map again because, let's be real, maybe they could have made things a little bit more interesting for the attack side, but I'm definitely within the camp, and I think this was always the same in, like, Counter-Strike as well. Maps don't need to be 50-50. I don't want maps that are 50-50. I don't want 6-6 halves. I think it takes it, like, for example, Nuke. Nuke, especially back in the day, that was literally like, what? Get like 14 rounds. This is in CS, of course. Yeah. And you could still lose. Like that was the sort of impressive nature of that map, is that you could have such an incredible half, 14-1, look like you're going to take it over the line, and then the other team just bangs you on the defense. But then the best teams in the world, you look at like when Astralis, obviously that was a newer version, but Astralis were one of the best teams in the world. They were incredible on the attack side of Nuke. So there's a skill to that. And I think that's something we saw with the likes of FPX, with Split. They got very good at the attack. The defense, kind of everyone could do that because a lot of it sung true to shitty attack teams. So when
Hmm.
they mastered that attack, I think that was very enjoyable. So I'm quite happy that we haven't seen any like mind-blowing changes, but these are the few that we do have.
Now, look, the thing is, quality of life for this map, there wasn't much that needed to be changed. So, I'm happy that I am actually genuinely happy they didn't just bastardize it to a point that we can't even recognize the map.
Yes.
I think what they did here is add some interesting flares to it that will help on some angles. I mean, especially the one on the screen here. This angle,
Yeah.
if you were fighting it before, it was very one dimensional. I don't think we saw many interesting engagements around there that weren't like they could have happened anywhere, a player sneaking by you in the smoke or whatever. This change though, it means actually taking that fight on the top ramp is going to be a completely different ball game. I think you're going to be much more likely to see action taking place here.
It's also just that you can kind of attack it from slightly different angles because before you're all running through at the exact same sort of headshot angle unless you're jumping
Yeah.
across. But the fact that you can take a slightly elevated and distance fight, I think makes it a lot more viable than just what is running into some sort of chokehold. And it'll probably make it more viable to actually use some of your utility a little bit better because you think about how close this wall is. A lot of the bouncing off and sort of using util to sort of create something is going to be a lot more difficult than how deep it is now. Gives you quite a bit more space. So yeah, not a huge change, but one that I think that as a sort of quality of life thing could be quite good. This one, like, they made the box a bit smaller.
Yeah. Someone got killed by a guy peeking around the edge of it and said, "No, we're scrapping that. No, 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 it's not happening anymore." It's not terribly interesting. I don't think it'll affect like range of Omen shredded steps or anything like that too much. Like, yeah,
Maybe a
so
few more people will fuck up some blast packs if they're up there and maybe not get
maybe.
around the corner. But also, as we're going to see, there isn't as much of a corner to get to anymore. So you're going to have to go quite a distance. I think this was one of the more interesting changes, to be honest, just getting rid of this sort of ledge because
Mhm.
this is one thing like on retakes is actually going to help out that defensive side quite a bit, not having that ledge there anymore. If you can even just take the rafters control, this spot is nowhere near as safe as it used to be. And you can bounce a lot more utility in from, like, for example, if you were someone throwing shock darts, you basically had to clip the sort of edge in the corner and people
Yeah.
could hide from it. Now you can snake bite very easily. So I think it definitely makes things interesting. Also with the box, because before people used to just crouch behind that as a little ratty position. It's taller now, so you can actually take proper fights from there.
Yeah, I really feel like when it comes to these changes, a lot of them, if not all of them, come down to a developer or group of developers who were involved in this map or have been tracking it since day one, looking at the barracks heat maps and just going, this isn't how we want it to be. There's certain
Yeah.
anomalies here that we don't want people to have this much value from that position where, almost every time someone went into the site, there was, or you were going into a retake, excuse me, there was somebody underneath there. And
Yep.
I think we've seen it across the board with agent pick rates, especially if something is 100% or it's so strong that it's considered a necessity. The devs look at that and go, no, 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 we don't like
Yeah.
that. We want to change that. We want to get some more debate out there. So, yeah, again, nothing terribly exciting, but something that will. I mean, that is a very tangible change from the retakes that we played on the 10 man. That made a huge difference. So just
The funny thing is with
regulate
the
that angle.
rotation of this, I think the bin going is actually the
Yeah,
bin going might actually be the most impactful thing on that because you used to be able to just sit sort of on the edge of that box and take like a bit of a nasty headshot angle around the side. Now it's a little bit more awkward to do that, so I feel like you're going to have to be a bit smarter clearing some of these angles. But it does
yeah.
seem like that's quite a common theme, actually. It's just making a lot of fights a little bit cleaner because there were so many sort of rat angles that you can go back to sort of here as well with like little angles that you could hide behind or crouch behind.
Hmm.
It seems like they're just taking a lot of those out and cleaning up like how you're going to be able to line up utility and almost reward sort of team play with double swings and stuff where it's not like, shit, sorry, there was a guy crouched on top of a bin who headshot me as I came around the corner.
Yeah, I think a perspective from top ramp here might almost be easier to see how different it is from an attacker's perspective because when you come up there, now there is one head height angle right? There's not a guy on top of the box. There's not a guy on the stairs and a guy below the stairs and a guy
Yeah,
halfway up the
yeah.
stairs. Now there is flat ground. That's where they're standing. They're not on top of the box or below or anything. So I think that helps out a ton in taking that fight, because how many times would you expect the guy to come and clear close to the box, like run past the bin
Yeah,
and
yeah.
peek you there, and he comes down below, so you shoot above his head or you've got to adjust whatever, but he's looking dead on you, knows exactly where you're standing. Makes a lot of sense. Another just statistical change I love to see.
I'm not gonna lie, this one took me a few seconds when they first tweeted it to realize what was actually gone. But now I'm just gonna quickly do it because then I feel like it helps your eyes realize what changed. Because initially I was like, oh, they've put a little bit of a lid on the top of the barrel, but they've actually taken the lip off the edge
Yes.
as well. And I think that's the bigger change, because I still remember one Sage slow and you're just fucked. You're just sat in that little corner. So I don't know if that's going to be a little bit easier to try and get out of that position. But again, it's one where I feel like a lot of fights peaking as an attacker become just that little bit easier. You can spot a lot more. It will help the defense as well with some slightly easier or less headshot angles. But again, I feel like a lot of this map is just like, let's clean things up so a lot of these fights are not just like, oh, I got owned by the lip of a corner of a wall and because this barrel was slightly lower down.
Yeah. Another solid change, really. Is that all of them? Or no, there's a couple more.
There's two more.
Two
So
more.
you got,
Let's go. Up
you
in the
got
tower.
this one's amazing.
Yeah.
The bin is gone. Which, again, maybe there'll be a couple of judge players who'll be like, oh, I used to sit on that bin and spam fucking headshots as everyone. But you could still just stand on
Just
top
go
of
the
the
other
box.
side. Yeah.
It doesn't matter, and you can hide in that corner. Again, I also think that this might help the defenders a little bit, because what it used to do is when you'd wrap this corner, that player was kind of exposed when they were on the edge of the box, because the bin forces them out a little bit. So, yeah, that one, again, that's basically nothing. And then you've got this sort of move here to extend out over on the B side.
Definitely makes you a lot less comfortable tucked in that corner. I mean, you're never safe from a guy peeking you on the site, being able to see at least your shoulder or something like that. I think that's a really really good change. One I didn't notice till I dropped down and then just felt real. I was like, where's my cover?
I think
gone?
that was
Why
the
am
one
I...
game I was on your team and you were just going, he's in the corner.
It just freaked me out. But yeah, it's just another one of those changes where you look at a position and just think they're winning from that position way too much, or they're having impact too much.
Well, yeah, the amount of just sort of like you'd put a tiny smoke down and then the guy was just hidden in it for the rest of the round. There's not really much you can do about it. So, yeah, those are now all of the changes. So, one of the questions I had, I think you kind of answered it already, but it's like, did they need to make a drastic change with this map?
No, they didn't need to. And I think it's shown in that they've had a couple months to work on it. And no drastic changes have been made, right? We've pumped out just a slightly more polished map, which is all you could really ask for when it came to Split, because it's the best goddamn map in the pool. Now let's see some big changes to Icebox and Breeze. I don't want to recognize those maps when they come back.
Well, that's the thing. We're now going to get into split decisions, which is obviously the part of the show where both of us have come up with a couple of statements. The other person gets to choose whether they argue for or against that statement, and then the other person has to argue the opposite. So a pretty straightforward sort of topic. And I'm going to be honest, I'm going to say my one first because it ties into kind of what you just said.
Okay.
This is the best map pool in Valorant we've ever had.
You're including Split being like definitively in the pool there.
Split,
Yes.
back in, and also Lotus as well.
I think so. I think it's the best one we've ever had. I do genuinely think that we'll see something like an Icebox depart next.
You're in the dream
willing it into existence,
please.
man. Please, Ryan, are you listening? Get rid of it, please. I'll pay. But when it comes to the pool that we've got right now, I think the new maps and maps like Fracture, that they really take you a while to figure out. Teams are starting to get there, and this one will be a much quicker uptake out of teams than what we saw from Fracture. I'm almost certain of that. So I think this is the best state that we've been in, where teams are going to want to play pretty much every map in the pool.
Yeah, I see. The only thing that I have to argue against this, and I think it is a decent point just for us as the main group of Icebox haters. Technically, there was a map pool in the game before Icebox came out.
That's true,
And
but when Icebox came out, right, it took us a while to get there to the Icebox comp. It took us a while, so it was fun at the start.
but that's the thing. So what? It would have been Bind, Haven, Ascent, Split. That's a pretty fucking banging map pool, if I'm being honest. And like, don't get me. And then after that, obviously, we got Icebox and then Breeze, which both maps, which I despise. So
what have we done?
It's time to go back. It's time to go back. Like, no, but I think that in terms of 7 map pool, I agree that this is the best one, but I do quite like those 4 maps. And for me playing, if we're looking purely from a ranked perspective, I would rather just have those 4 maps and never play it.
From a BO5 grand final perspective.
Yeah, you just randomize and play them.
yeah. That's a great idea. What could go wrong?
God. Yeah. Silly one to start things off. The next one I've got is so much worse, but here we go. Mitch, what have you got?
So I'm going to go with this map will be Harbor's breakout map. That's Lotus will be Harbor's breakout map.
See, I've seen a load of like coaches baiting on Twitter. Like I think it was Immy was like, "Oh, Harbor's A tier," and I'm like, I'm gonna wait until I see it, but right now, no, I don't think so. Like I think that there are aspects of his kit which will work. I think like going over onto like those A takes will be pretty nice. But the problem I find is, for example, the wall he can use to basically get in. I feel like you can do that with a speedway of Neon, and then you also have all the benefits of Neon at the same time. I think other controllers just have so much more value, and it's what you lose, because I definitely think that you could run him as like a secondary controller, like alongside an Astra, or maybe even alongside something like a Cypher, and just have those extra cages as a few extra smokes. But I still just think in comparison to like a Viper, I don't see it. It would revolve around the team having a very solid setup, and I don't know. I feel like if he was going to have a breakout map, it would have been Breeze.
Yeah, that's fair. I think the one thing that I love about him is the fact that his wall is custom. The fact that you can come up with so many different ideas for blocking off choke points in a map that's all about choke points. I'm almost certain that you could smoke effectively B and then get a decent bit of C in it as well if you've got the right lineup for it. And so as an attacker, I think the amount of blitz aggro that you can get out of it, have your utility fly out, use the refreshing utility later on in the round, and especially when you're dealing with some of these pieces of util like a Killjoy, I think he could be strong here, getting into some of the sites, blocking off some angles. I think it's going to require a very specific kind of team to get the value out of his cascades and so on.
So is your definition of breakout being that one team can make it work?
It's that you get yeah, I guess so.
His breakout map is that someone is able to use him.
To be honest, I think his breakout map for me will just be where there's a team who you look at and go, they're playing Harbor and it's not a gimmick, you know, where you're like, oh wow, they have a cool idea.
They're playing Harbor and they win the map.
And they won.
Because that also doesn't happen.
That would help. I suppose really it should have been Pearl, if anything, right, with all that water around, but yeah. I guess it's blocked out by the dome.
Okay, so my next one is that a map in central London would be great.
I like what? Okay, yeah, sure. Because I love
you would like to have.
I'd love to have a map in central London.
I would love to have it.
You know, Tom, I really enjoyed my time in England. I think the UK crowd was fantastic. Everybody I met there.
Just about to like.
This one, Baldwin, was very nice.
I feel like you've just given up your Irish passport by arguing for this one.
No, look. At the end of the day, Tom, you know, time moves on, and you know, time heals all wounds, and that's what it's all about. It's about forgiveness. It's about love. And so I love the idea of having a map in every city. I think every city should have one. But Tom, please do tell me why you fucking hate London and
No, I
England. Go
don't.
ahead.
I actually love London, but I could just never imagine destroying it by planting the spike. So I would never want to do any damage to London. Thus, I could never build a map here.
Ah, and you're okay with doing it to all the other cities in the game. I see. How very British. Let's move on to the next one. So I was going to say for Lotus, on a similar track to speaking about the agents, I had this weird idea that maybe you could play Lotus without a controller.
I think you. The thing is, it's like the pacing of what you would have to do would be very, very risky. So it's like I think, like sort of what I was saying before about using like cipher cages and stuff, it would be very all in. Like if you run a comp that had like Neon Breach and you basically were taking a lot of very early space, you maybe had even something like actually, you wouldn't need Neon and a Phoenix, but just like you could use the Phoenix to get yourself across certain angles in a similar way. But I still just don't like, especially when it comes to that defensive side, just being able to delay teams with all of the controller utility, I think will have too much value. So in theory, you could, but I personally would say you shouldn't. I don't know if that answers your question at all.
So you could, but you shouldn't. Yeah, I'm not sure that that's. It feels like you've split your decision on that one, but
I kind of have.
Yeah, a little bit. You know, I think the reason for me is like if you think about some of the value that you're able to bring with these walls, with a Phoenix, a Neon, a Cypher, you could do some crazy stuff. But then, realistically, if you add in a Harbor, you end up with the same super flexible comp, but a little bit more control to it. So it's hard to argue that you wouldn't. I think the main thing, though, the main glaring point is that Omen right now looks fantastic, and coming into this map with Paranoia. It's huge. You've got refreshing utility in terms of your smoke, something that we highlighted as maybe a reason you'd want Harbor in there, so you can make some of those blitz plays, but still refresh in a late round. And you've got a Paranoia that can allow you, when you're actually going to make the push, to do one hell of a lot. I mean, even think about the C side. If you're not going for the proactive C side aggression that we talked about, and you're then back on the side itself, you know, your Killjoy just sat back. Oh, I'm going to hold it with my turret. Well, now you've been paranoid, a jet updraft dashed in, you're dead. You've lost the site, and you're the solo player over there. So, like, that alone is an element of gameplay that I think there's not many other agents you can bring into the fold that that you'll get that value out of.
But that's the other thing as well, especially with Astra. We've seen it in the past. If you don't want to run a Sentinel, you can almost get away with using her as that role. Like, and I think this is a map that, especially on defense, is going to be really difficult to hold. So if you do have like a Killjoy and an Astra, you can then have anchors like on either side of the map and have delaying utility. So I think like. I hope she's going to get a lot of playtime, especially with some of the one-ways being taken out. Although I think people realized that it was just the sort of like glitchy ones that are like holding onto the ceiling. You can still do them just on walls and stuff. That's similar to Brimstone ones, but it's just the sort of bullshit ones that you can't get away with anywhere near as much. I got a nice one to finish on though. And this does bring it back to the competitive side of things. Brazil will be the most competitive tournament in Valorant history.
Well, it has to be. I mean, that's not a hard split decision. Go ahead with your counter to it, but you got the most teams there. You got the highest level of skill. You got the most maps. You get the most agents as well. I mean, all of the matrix data is multiplying, right? There's more points of data to consider every event, and right now you got more than ever out there, and some of the best players in the world are better than we've ever seen. I don't know. The only thing we need is someone like Enzo in the mix, and then we're guaranteed to be the best.
Is on a plane. I think he said he was going to Korea, which definitely was a lie.
It's the wrong way.
Yeah.
It's the wrong direction.
But no, the reason I sort of said most competitive is because I wanted to use it as almost like it depends what you consider competition. Because I would argue going into last year, some of the peaks we had of like teams basically being together for a year, like you think of like peak Optic, you think of peak FPX, like being able to sort of grind out tournament after tournament to the point where they were the best. You had Paper X like pull off that crazy run. You had Zeta as well. There was a lot of teams that Fnatic could, maybe should win tournaments and didn't because of how competitive everything was. Brazil is going to have the most teams and probably have like the most sort of results that could go either way, But is that peak competition? Because when we get to the end of the event, there's going to be a lot of teams that dropped out because they weren't ready. There's going to be a lot of teams that dropped out because they hadn't had the practice that they needed yet. There's going to be a lot of teams that drop out because they haven't built a good enough team, and that's just going to be a factor of it.
Yeah.
The fact is, the VCT over the last 2 years basically got rid of a lot of the teams that are going to be here early so that the real competition could begin. So I would almost argue that when we had that sort of the FPX winning in Copenhagen, that tournament was incredibly competitive. You then talk about Loud coming back at Champions. That tournament was incredibly competitive. From the beginning, we had ideas of who would be the favorites, but ultimately, the prediction of the winner, a lot of people didn't have it as Loud. Some people even made some tier lists that made some tears flow, but nonetheless.
I don't know, man. Lothar put him down there. I didn't say anything.
He's gonna hate you for that. I might even have to edit that out. But yeah, I do think Brazil is going to be very competitive, but I'm intrigued to see what the peak competition is. Because although like some of the teams, I think like 100 Thieves are going to be insane, I do start to question like, are teams going to have had enough time, like with some of them only just getting together like now? You've got a month to basically work on everything that you have to try and get ready for Brazil. That's not going to be an easy task.
Yeah, I think you've got a lot of pieces from very successful teams floating around and taking the knowledge that they've had from those teams and putting them into a new team. You know, you got 5 players coming together. They're bringing in so many different aspects of knowledge. It's going to be very difficult to, I guess, get everybody on the same page for coaching staff and on such a tight timeline. Yeah, I can see that for sure. There's going to be a lot of issues for teams that have left it that little bit later or had some logistical challenges to overcome.
Yeah.
At the same time, I think we've just seen it so many times how teams cope with even stand-ins. I think the players that we have in this scene are unbelievable, and the rate that they adapt, the amount of Valorant these guys are playing, they can slot together so well. 3-man teams that end up with 2 subs still playing well in international events.
Yeah.
You know, even with a couple days practice, it's not unheard of. So I expect that we're still going to see a very high level of play. And if anything, the fact that everybody's being knocked down a peg starting again, that might help.
Well, either way, Mitch, that is it for this episode of Split Decision. Of course, I'd love to hear the people in the comments, their thoughts on some of these topics. Like, are they happy with the map pool right now, or are they looking forward to playing Lotus? What are their initial thoughts on what they've seen or played? Where would you like a map set? Obviously, I sort of loaded the question with putting in London, but I'm sure there's plenty of interesting places in the world
Dublin
that
would be
you'd love
nice
to see. Maybe not there.
Get an Irish agent out there as well.
Okay,
you know?
we're gonna move swiftly up. But and also, what are you looking forward to most in Brazil? Make sure you like and subscribe as well, and hopefully we'll be seeing you again next week.